Hey, what's up guys, it's Dlsturbedx, and today I'm going to be explaining to you guys exactly how the DPS stat shown in game is pretty much broken and just flat out unreliable. Before I get into the video, I just want to ask if you can please like the video and share it, because I'm mainly making this to spread awareness about the DPS stat, because every day I see people butchering their build just to get that number up, and it drives me absolutely insane. It is quite honestly kind of ruining the meta of the game. So if you could like the video and share it, that would increase the amount of people that get to see it and hopefully get the problem addressed, or at the very least make the community much more aware about this problem. Either way, let's get right into it. So first off, we have to have a brief understanding of what DPS is. Obviously, DPS stands for damage per second, and the game basically calculates this by mushing all of your stats together, such as crit damage, crit chance, extra weapon damage, accuracy, ability, all this other stuff, and then it averages all that out, giving your DPS or your damage per second. But the problem with this is that it doesn't take a whole bunch of things into account when calculating your DPS, because the game sees certain things as situational, so it just rules it out completely when calculating your DPS, so there's a huge chunk of extra damage that's left out of the equation. And on top of that, there are some things that when adding onto your character will inflate your DPS just due to the game making certain assumptions and it kind of just being pretty much broken. Pretty soon here I'm going to be showing a few examples, but I just want to make it clear that the main reason I'm making this video is because I see the vast majority of the community, even huge YouTubers themselves, inflating their DPS with artificial bonuses, making their DPS shoot up, but in the process completely butchering their builds, but all doing it just because the DPS statistic tells them that it's better. Recently, this has been a huge problem because with the addition of the underground, people can get 268 gear set items pretty easily, but they are primarily going to be blind and Firecrest pieces, because that's like 95% of what drops out of the underground. Personally, I think that the blind gear set is probably the worst gear set in the game, and Firecrest really isn't that far behind it. But despite these sets being horrible, you see people running around in these sets all the time, leaving their old sets behind just because when equipping these sets, it made their DPS and toughness go up, so they just assume, oh, it's better for me, when in reality, they are completely ruining their build. Now I'm going to be showing you an example. So here you can see I'm using all 268s, and my stats look pretty impressive, right? I have 307k DPS, over 400k toughness, and 18k skill power. But look at the build I'm running. I'm using 3 pieces of Firecrest and 3 other pieces of completely random gear set. The only gear set bonus I'm actually benefiting from is from having 3 pieces of Firecrest, which gives me 100% reload speed, which inflates the living crap out of my DPS. Yes, I know 100% reload speed is a pretty good DPS bonus, and I'm not really going to argue that, but to prove my point, here's my Sentry Call build. As you can see, my stats don't look as impressive. I have 220k DPS, 409k toughness, and 21k skill power, but I'm using 5 pieces of Sentry's Call and Savage Gloves, which is the best DPS build currently in the game against NPCs. Now let's compare the damage that I was doing to the NPCs. So starting off, let's take a look at the Firecrest build that I had on before. As you can see, my gun is barely doing any damage to these guys, and the accuracy on it is just absolutely atrocious because I used weapon mods that made the DPS stat go up by a lot. Now let's take a look at my Sentry build against NPCs. As you can see, I'm critting against them for almost 4 times as much as I was with the Firecrest build, and my gun's recoil is just phenomenal. I'm not having like any recoil problems at all. So already that should be enough proof to sway you from worrying about the DPS stat at all. Now for those of you wondering why the Firecrest said it did much more damage but sucked in comparison to the Sentry build, it's because of a load of things. First off, it's because the DPS statistic doesn't take into account enemy armor damage and damage to elites, and with my Sentry build, my enemy armor damage plus my damage to elites accumulates to 97% damage that just straight up isn't even being taken into consideration when calculating the DPS statistic, because it's basically seen as situational. Now take a look at the Firecrest build. My damage to elites is 0% and my enemy armor damage is way worse than it was on the Sentry's Call build, and that's one of the main reasons I was doing so much less damage. And that's not even mentioning the fact that with the Firecrest build I had much less headshot damage, and crit chance, but yet the DPS stats still thought the Firecrest build was godly in comparison to the Sentry build. Now let's take a look at how modding your weapon can inflate your DPS by a crap ton and pretty much just ruin it in the process. So here you can see I have my beautiful Sentry build on, and if I go to change the magazine on my G36 to one with rate of fire, it will increase my DPS by over 30k. The reason for this is because rate of fire makes you do more DPS in a perfect world, but it will ruin your accuracy if the gun already has like high RPM or is modded badly, therefore making you miss more shots and in turn making your actual damage per second way less due to you missing shots. Now taking a look at the grip, I currently have stability on it so that my gun doesn't flinch upwards when I shoot, but if I put on this laser sight that gives me accuracy, the DPS skyrockets. And it's pretty much the exact same story with my muzzle. This is because accuracy is for whatever reason the DPS stat's best friend. It thinks that when you have a bunch of accuracy stacked up, you'll be landing way more shots, so it inflates your DPS by a crap load. But that's simply not true, because as you can see, with removing my stability mods and replacing them with accuracy, my gun is ironically enough inaccurate as all hell. But unfortunately enough, people don't really pay attention to that. All they pay attention to is the fact that their DPS went up by over 80k, so they can go brag to their friends and every other living soul on the planet about how good their stats are, when in reality they're just shooting marshmallows at people and missing pretty much all their shots. while I'm over here landing most of my shots, doing probably around 4 or 3 times more of the damage that they are doing, yet my DPS stat is still significantly lower. So hopefully that's enough to persuade you guys from paying any attention at all to that broken DPS number. There are a multitude of other things that are broken with the DPS stat too, and other things it doesn't calculate, but it would probably be just a waste of time for me to go over every single little thing. Instead, I'm just going to give you guys a few tips on how to actually see if your build is any good or not. Firstly, you want to pick a good gear set with good set bonuses. Don't just be using Firecrest or Blind or Lone Star because it makes your stats go up. Use a set that gives meaningful bonuses to your setup. For example, I like to play a DPS set, so I'm using Sentrys Call and Savage Gloves because it's the best for doing flat out damage against NPCs due to its set bonuses. Another thing to look out for is your weapon talents, because these can increase your DPS by a ton, and by the way, the DPS stat doesn't accurately take into account most of the gun talents, which really isn't much of a surprise at all, but just try to get some talents that complement what you're trying to do. Also, just pay attention to your stats. Look at your crit damage, your crit chance, your enemy armor damage, damage to elites, weapon damage bonuses, all of that stuff, because those bonuses can increase your DPS way more than you would ever know, and definitely cannot be overlooked. But above all things, just see if you're doing good when playing. If you're doing like a skill build and you see your skills put in work, while you're still able to do some pretty decent damage against NPCs, then you're doing a good job. But if you're trying to build a DPS setup and when you're shooting people their health is barely moving, obviously you're doing something wrong. The moral of the story is that your build cannot be determined how good it is solely based around your stats. Every single day I see people on YouTube, in my games, in my comment section, bragging about how good their build is, and all they say about it is the DPS stats, the toughness, and the skill power, as if that's all that matters. But to me, that seriously doesn't mean jack shit. What I care about is what gear set you're using and that you have actually good rolls on everything. That's really all that matters. Your DPS statistic means absolutely nothing because, like displayed before, you could have a huge DPS number and actually be shooting peas at people with complete shit accuracy because your gear set and rolls are complete garbage. Like I said before, the main reason I want to make this video was because people think that it's all about those statistics. I ask people what build they're using and they just tell me they have 300k DPS, 400k toughness, and 10k skill power, and think that they're king of the world, but they're using the blind gear set with accuracy mods and all other kinds of bullcrap just to inflate their stats. And sorry to say, but their build sucks complete ass. They think they're badasses because of their DPS and their toughness being so high, so they pay no mind to it at all. This problem is pretty much tainting the community because I see people left and right using weapon mods that ruin their gun's usefulness, and gear sets that don't help them at all, but their stats are super high so they think they're a god. And on top of that, I see YouTubers making videos bragging about how good their build is when they're using some of the worst gear sets in the game. It's seriously a pity. I'm not trying to hate on people with this video. Ultimately, I'm just trying to spread awareness to the community so that every time I play, I'm not just barraged with people bragging about their DPS. And also that the word build gets a new meaning. People think it's all about DPS, toughness, and skill power, and when that's seriously only a portion of what matters. Either way guys, I'm pretty much just going to stop ranting now. I hope you learned something from this video. That was pretty much my intention, and if you did, please make sure to drop a like and share the video so that others can learn something too, and maybe we can fix the meta of the game in the process. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.